Welcome humans, creatures, and even aliens. Please take a seat. Today we have something spicy to go over. Because yesterday we went over some balance tuning. However, the balance tuning of yesterday was small stuff. It was cheap, it wasn't really that meaningful. Meanwhile, today, on this Saturday, we have quite some interesting set of changes to quite a few specs, ranging from tanks to healers to DPSers. So, let's go over all of the changes that are supposedly going to go live in the next build of the beta and also should be live on the PTR as well. Starting with Vengeance Demon Hunter. Now, as a spoiler, as we said, the most promising tanks in the beta so far have been Vengeance, Blood, and Protection Warrior. And today we have changes to Vengeance and we have changes to Blood Death Knight. So the first tank we are going over is Demon Hunter, and it starts very well. It's a very positive start for Vengeance because the majority of their damage abilities are getting buffed by 5 to 10%. That's gonna be the range. So things like Sigil of Flame, things like Shear and the upgrade to Shear, Fracture, all get buffed by 10%. You have Soul Cleave also getting buffed by 5%. You have Spirit Bomb getting buffed by 5%. You have Fell Devastation getting buffed by 10% in damage. The main change, the bigger of the change, which goes way beyond this tiny 5 to 10%, is Firebrand. One of your key damaging abilities you can have in the talent tree. Firebrand gets its initial damage increased by 50%, which is very, very big. And then the dot damage left behind by Firebrand, it's even bigger. It's 6 times as much as before. So it's a massive buff to Firebrand. You then continue to have buffs because Soul Carver also gets its damage increase, your cooldown gets its damage increase, and also Frailty. The duration of Frailty goes from 5 seconds to 6 seconds, together with the power-up of Frailty, Void Reaver, which makes you take less damage by enemies affected by Frailty, also goes to 6 seconds to match the duration of Frailty. Fine, up to this point it's just buffs. The damage of Vengeance is getting increased. Where's the catch? What is the counter to all of this? The counter to all of this is that Vulnerability gets nerfed by 50% for Vengeance. Vulnerability is the talent which makes you do more damage to enemies affected by Frailty. So, Frailty, by default, affecting enemies with Frailty just gives you 8% leech. It gives you 8% damage you do to the targets you heal. Then you take Void Reaver, which also makes them do less damage to you, and then you take Vulnerability so that you can do more damage to them. At rank 1, it's 4% more damage, and at rank 2, it's 8% more damage. Now, cut by 50%, it's 2 and 4. Now, you might be saying, well, going from 8% more damage to 4% more damage, with all of the damage increase Vengeance is also getting, it's not that big of a deal. You would be correct if it wasn't for the fact that Vengeance Demon Hunter also plays with Soul Crush. Multiple applications of Frailty may overlap. So, Frailty, which is applied on the targets by abilities like Spirit Bomb, by Soul Cleave, by Sigil of Flame, if you put down Sigil of Flame, and then a second Sigil of Flame, and then you go a couple of Shears, or 1 Spirit Bomb and 1 Shear, you get very quickly up to 4 stacks. 4 stacks, at 8% more damage each, it's 32% more damage. Now it's cut by 50%. So the 32% more damage becomes a 16% more damage. That's why the majority of your abilities are getting buffed in damage by default, and the base damage of Vulnerability gets nerfed significantly. This is likely done to make the right side of the tree stronger, because all of this stuff that we just mentioned, from Void Reaver to Soul Crush to Vulnerability to Frailty to Spirit Bomb, they are all on the left side. The right side, which is the Firebrand spreading, the Immolation Aura damage, it's on the right side. So perhaps buffing significantly Firebrand and also buffing your base damage to nerf Vulnerability in return is perhaps an attempt from Blizzard to make both sides of the tree a little bit more balanced, a little bit more even, giving more choice to Vengeance Demon Hunter in what to pick. Yes, overall it nets out to be a nerf to Vengeance, even if we account for the fact that now Frailty lasts 1 second longer, so you have 1 more second to apply stacks. The stacks will still increase the damage you do by 50% less, so it's gonna net out to be a nerf, but if it's for the purpose, if it's for the attempt at making the tree more balanced, then it's a good change overall for Vengeance, while still being a nerf. After Vengeance, we have Balanced Druid. So we moved from a tank to a damage dealer. Balanced Druid had gotten significantly nerfed quite a few weeks back, massively. So at the very least now they get something back, because Astral Power generation of Wrath goes from 6 to 8. This might seem small, but it's particularly good because one of the major nerfs to balance was their Astral Power generation and the Astral Power cost of Starfall, and in particular Star Surge. So getting a couple more Astral Powers every time you Wrath, it might actually end up being quite significant. So you should be positive as a Balanced Druid once you see the changes. However, where you should not be positive is in the fact that the changes do not stop there. The changes continue. And you don't want to see what's about to happen, because Starfall, your main source of AoE damage, gets nerfed by 30%, and Starfire, your secondary source of AoE damage, also gets nerfed by 15%. Now, I have scoured through the beta, some Mythic Plus keys, some raid tests, and I didn't really see Balanced Druid being this oppressive force in AoE. If you were to ask me your top 5, perhaps even your top 10 of AoE damage dealers in the beta, I don't think I would have put Balanced Druid in there, which is why this set of changes to their two prime AoE abilities, besides just their dots, getting nerfed so much. So maybe Blizzard knows something that we don't, maybe Blizzard has something more in store for Balanced Druid, because otherwise just these two changes look pretty bad for the AoE of Balanced Druid. Then we move and we complete the trifecta. We start with a tank, we go in the middle with a damage dealer, and now we move to a healer because it's Restoration Shaman. So we do have a few changes to Restoration Shaman. These are a little bit weird because, as always, they are part of the core aura modifiers, which are not guaranteed, they are not confirmed as set of changes, but what we do see is that from these core modifiers, after the initial 20% damage buff that Shaman has received a couple of days ago, Restoration Shaman did, they seem to be planning to buff even further Lava Burst and Flame Shock. Flame Shock got a 20% damage increase, now it looks like it's gonna go up to 44%, so 24% damage more. And Lava Burst also looks like it's planned to be getting some 20-ish, 25-ish% damage increase further for Restoration Shaman, but those two are not quite as confirmed. What is more confirmed are the two healing changes for Restoration Shaman, because one, your bigger cooldown next to Spirit Link, Healing Tide Totem is getting buffed by 30% more healing. The ability itself doesn't function with things like Cloudburst, it doesn't function with many of the other healing buffs you can get, it's just a drop and forget type of cooldown. However, getting a freebie, getting a free 30% healing increase is never something bad. Then we have another heal buff. This was the big question mark of the Shadowlands expansion. What was this talent doing in the options of Restoration Shaman? What was the purpose of Downpour? Turns out, the purpose of Downpour was to never be used because it was garbage. So now it gets increased in healing by 30% as well. The confusing part, of course, is that if you look at the premier choice that was taken over Downpour, it was Wellspring. Wellspring had a 20-second cooldown healing for 190% spell power, while Downpour had, if you were hitting all 6 targets, a 35-second cooldown healing for 175% spell power. So basically, it has a 15-second longer cooldown than Wellspring while healing for 10% less, and Shamans had to keep that for the entirety of Shadowlands. So at the very least now, the healing of Downpour is significantly improved. So now it's much more worth taking than before. It is still a solid ability to use now for Restoration Shaman. It doesn't, of course, fix the issue that at the moment Shaman is the lowest HPS, the lowest throughput, the lowest healing done healer out of all of the healers in Dragonflight, but it's a start. After Shaman, we do a full reset. We went tank, then DPS, then healer, so we go back to tank, because we go to Blood Death Knight. Blood Death Knight has gotten a similar treatment to Vengeance Demon Hunter. So, as a similar treatment, we start positively. We have a near 20% damage buff to Blood Boil. We then have a 15% damage buff to Bone Storm. We have a 5% more damage to Blood Plague to your Coagulopathy talent. Consumption, one of your cooldowns, also gets increased by 15% in damage. Heartstrike, this is much more important because Heartstrike is a big part of your AoE damage, your multi-hitting hard strike when you are inside of Death and Decay, the damage is increased by 15% to that strike, so that's quite good as well. Marrow Rend gets buffed by 10% in damage. Perseverance of the Ebon Blade gives you 2% more versatility at rank 2. Rapid Decomposition makes you have your dots tick more often. Shattering Bone gives you 10% more damage to your Bone Shield charges exploding. Fine, we get the point. Blood Death Knight is getting buffed in damage. I just saw this with Vengeance and then they got nerfed. So, where's the catch for Blood? The catch for Blood is that unlike Vengeance Demon Hunter, where their damage was quite high, so they were perhaps needed to be reined back in the damage they did, the problem of Blood isn't as much the damage they are doing in the beta. They are not amongst the highest damage dealing tanks in the beta. Their problem is their self-sufficiency, their survivability, their tankiness by basically playing on their own and healing themselves. So, the nerfs are to Voracious and to improved Death Strike. TLDR, your Death Strike heals for 10% less and you get 5% less leech permanently. That's basically what it does. Voracious is 5% less healing with Death Strike and 5% less leech, and then improved Death Strike is 5% less healing with Death Strike. So that seems to be the counter. Death Knight is quite low in damage as a tank compared to the rest, so we buff their damage, but also Death Knight is too far ahead with how much they heal themselves for, so we nerf a little bit their healing. That seems to be the compromise Blizzard has gone for when it comes to Blood Death Knight. We continue our rotation. After going to a tank, we go to a healer. This one is a small one, because this one is to Mistweaver Monk. Mistweaver Monks had been parading, and they had also been campaigning for the change reading buff to Revival. Blizzard caves in and finally buffs Revival, because the healing of Revival goes from 283% spell power to 325% spell power, so basically a 15% healing increase to Revival. Personally, I still think it's trash. It's terrible, the cooldown is far too long to have a 3-minute cooldown ability on the same level of things like Aura Mastery, on the same level of things like Spirit Link or even Healing Tide Totem to be this bad. I would have rather wanted other things from Revival, other effects from Revival in terms of a buff, rather than simply making it heal for more. I don't think that's what's gonna make Revival good. Fine, I guess Mistweaver Monks will take it, at the very least it's still a buff, but I don't think it's that great. Now, we have to break the combo. We have to break our combo of tank DPS healer, because now we have to go back to tanks, because we have one more tank which gets changed for today. I mentioned Blood and I mentioned Vengeance, which were the good ones, which were the promising ones from Dragonflight. However, there is a tank which had been, I would say, the black sheep, the butt of all jokes, the meme generator of Dragonflight for tanks, which was Guardian Druid. Guardian Druid has gone through a couple of weeks of positive, albeit small, changes, one after the other, one after the next. Nothing great, nothing groundbreaking, but at the very least they were on the positive side. We continue this trend for today, except now these changes are quite more significant. I would say these changes are going to put Guardian Druid solidly outside of the meme bracket of tanks. They are still not the best, or close to the best, but they're definitely not memeable anymore. So, the first change is to Dream of Scenarios. The main change of this talent is that now, when it procs after you take damage and this effect procs, your regrowth is also doing 200% more healing. It's still instant, it's still free, it's still castable in all forms, it's just that now you have 200% more healing. This is significant. As a Guardian Druid in 400 item level, so roughly heroic / high normal raid gear from Dragonflight, this heals you. The base regrowth as a Guardian Druid healed you for about 10% of your max HP. With this talent, when it procs, this is going to heal you for 30, a bit over 30% of your max HP. Which, you know, it's a very good talent. What makes this even better is the fact that in one of the previous changes, Blizzard split Dream of Scenarios from Ursoc's Fury, right? Ursoc's Fury, your must-take legendary of Shadowlands, the one that turns your trash damage into an absorb shield, that was a choice with Dream of Scenarios. So, if you ever went down that side of the talent tree, you were always going to take Ursoc's Fury. with the last change, it made Dream of Scenarios and Ursoc's Fury both a standalone choice. So you no longer only had to choose one of those two. Now you can take them both, which is very good for this talent because it was previously considered weaker than Ursoc's Fury, so never taken. However, there is something even stronger in terms of talent changes for Guardian Druid because it is Rage of the Sleeper. The relatively unutilized legendary from Shadowlands gets a gigantic buff. Previously, Rage of the Sleeper was a 90-second cooldown ability which gave you a 10-second long 25% damage reduction, and while the duration was active, you were also reflecting some 50% attack power damage back at your attackers. It was quite okay. It was a 90-second cooldown for 25% DR. It wasn't that great. As we know, the biggest weakness of Guardian Druid is being unkillable inside of Incarnation, and then outside of Incarnation they have gaps of power which are kind of too big to work at very high keys compared to other tanks in Mythic Plus. So the change that Rage of the Sleeper gets is super important because they keep all of this stuff. They keep the reflecting damage, they keep the damage reduction. What they gain on top of what they already have from this talent is 15% more damage, 25% more leech, and the cooldown going from 90 to 60 seconds. So now this is arguably the strongest tank cooldown in the game. 25% less damage. It makes you heal yourself for 25% of the damage you're doing. It also gives you 15% more damage, and it gives you some free damage in the form of reflecting 47% attack power damage back at your attackers. So now with Barkskin on a 1-minute cooldown, with Rage of the Sleeper on a 1-minute cooldown, with being able to take Survival of the Fittest to reduce the cooldown of Barkskin even more, now perhaps it's more easy, it's more manageable for you as a Guardian Druid to start bridging the gaps between your Incarnation cooldowns with this very, very powerful talent now getting basically reworked to be much, much stronger. Lastly, we finish with a talent which is not nearly as exciting or powerful as the previous two, but it's worth pointing out because it was quite annoying. Tooth and Claw was a good talent in the effect it gave, giving you 15% less damage taken whenever you proc this talent. The annoyance of this talent was the name, was the term, was the 4 letters Mole. Guardian Druids don't like Mole, they don't like to press it, they don't like to even see the animation or even to hear the sound of Mole. It's a terrible ability, in particular because it costs Rage. You want to spend Rage for other things as a Guardian Druid, not for this. So Blizzard thought, okay fine, we see your complaints, we fix them. We fix them by making this talent proc and give you no cost of Mole. So now you can gain the effect of this talent when your auto attacks proc it, and you get to cast Mole for free. So now you no longer have to do the most annoying thing you can do as a Guardian Druid, which is having to press Mole and spend Rage on Mole. Now you can do it for free. So, as I said, it's not nearly as much of a power change than the previous two talents of Guardian, but it's at the very least a pretty good quality of life change for Guardian. And actually, hold on a second, because past Izen is taking a break. Now we have future Izen coming out. This is just a few hours before this video actually comes out, because we have yet another round of balance tuning, which we're not gonna split into 2 videos for, because it is something that has to do with Guardian Druid that we're just talking about right now. As we were going on praising the positive buffs to Guardian Druid, we actually got even more buffs to Guardian Druid. It isn't just the tiny changes, which are still quite good, like Reinforced Fur. The armor increase of Iron Fur has been buffed by 100%. Instead of 4% more armor, it's 8% more armor. Scintillating Moonlight, previously nerfed to making your Moonfire reduce the damage the enemies deal to you by 2 to 4%. Now it has been buffed back to 5 to 10%, so at rank 2 you are effectively gaining 6% less damage taken. Pretty much all the time, because if you're playing the Moonfire spam build, you will have all of your enemies with Moonfire on them, so that's pretty good buff. However, we have something much bigger than that. As we said always with this type of changes, we have the disclaimer. This is an aura modifier change, and as we have seen in the past, aura modifier changes not always make it past the testing phase from Blizzard. Sometimes they didn't make it in the hotfix, sometimes they didn't make it in the new beta build, etc, etc. So it's not guaranteed, but at the very least we can see the intention of Blizzard, which is to buff all of the damage of Guardian Druid by 50%. Not just the abilities like Maul, Mangle and Trash, but also the talents and the special effects like Brambles or like Lunar Beam. So everything about the damage of Guardian Druid is supposedly going to get buffed by 50%. So if we were already praising the buffs that Druid had before even talking about these ones, if we add these ones to the mix, that is a significant round of buffs to Guardian Druid. So, as I said, at the end of these changes, I believe that Guardian Druid is now a significantly more solid tank compared to a couple of months ago. I'm still not sure if it's going to make it to the meta stage of Dragonflight, but it is definitely much more in the contention, in the discussion for it compared to before, compared to prior to these changes. And that was pretty much all we had for today. We have a handful more of very tiny changes for warriors. Blizzard has gotten this fetish of constantly sending out barrages of extremely minor, extremely meaningless set of changes to particularly Arms and Fury. They keep getting these changes for very, very small things. They aren't really reworking the specs, they aren't really changing it significantly, they are just getting all of these tiny additions. One of the more outstanding ones for today is the 5% damage buff to Mortar Strike for Arms Warrior, and a few of the damage increases to your Overpower and to your Execute, and the cooldown reduction, the cooldown change to Skull Splitter, going from 30-second cooldown to 21-second cooldown, but nothing too groundbreaking for Arms Warrior for today. Of course, with all of the list of changes being done, the more outstanding of the changes were to the tanks, Blood, Vengeance and Guardian. So basically, two of the best performing tanks and the worst performing tank got changed for today. The one for Druids are of course clear buffs, the ones for Vengeance are a net nerf overall. The one for Blood, you know, I think you should take the trade as a Blood Death Knight because you were admittedly healing for far too much, being much too strong by yourself. So the fact that Blizzard isn't just nerfing you and calling it a day, they are actually giving you some compensation. They're actually giving you some 5 to 10% more damage while they nerf your healing. I think overall it nets out to be a good change for the health of the spec and the health of the balance between the tanks, so it's not nearly as bad. Thankfully, we have a full day of balance changes without having to see Priest. That is a very positive day, in my opinion. So overall, I think it was quite interesting to see all of these changes, in particular the ones to the tank. And I am quite excited, in particular for Guardian Druid, to test it out in the beta to see how it's playing out now with these changes. So, with all of this overall balance tuning recap being done for today, I'm going to leave you to the rest of whatever you were doing on this weekend. I am, of course, going to thank everyone for watching this video, starting from my dear Patreon supporters. Thanks, as usual, for the contribution, the support you're giving me in what allows me to continue to produce content for WoW, for all of you to enjoy. But you can still support in other ways, which don't include having to go and take some money out of your e-girl simping donation fund. So you can still do it completely for free by liking and commenting down below on this video, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. You can still, of course, for more social interactions and general parasocial relationships with your imaginary friend, follow me on Twitter, as well as subscribing to my Patreon to get access to my Discord server right over at these two links. Now, with this said and done, I have to leave. I have to go and do some very cool things on this Saturday afternoon. Thank you guys again for watching. See you guys soon. And in the meantime, the very cool things are having to go to the store and buy some groceries for my 94 years old aunt. I know, crazy experiments for today.